Hello and welcome back to another of our GrassChat episodes in this wonderful series that we've been doing, finding out lots of fascinating facts and stories about some of the people from within the world of autograss. My latest guest, I'm really pleased to have as somebody to talk to. I would certainly say one of the quieter folks of the autograss world, but as we're about to find out, I'm sure, lots to actually say now the time has come. I'm absolutely delighted to say that my guest is the one and only Mr. John Shorter. John, good evening. Hello. How's things with you in this world so far at the moment?
Yeah, it's all right. Work's been busy, as in my day job, and we've had quite a few race cars pass through over the winter as well, which is nice to do. Keeps us occupied, when we can't be doing anything else really. So yeah, it's all good.
Yeah. So what sort of thing do you do as a day job then? So because obviously everybody has to try and keep going somehow. So do you have something exciting to do on the daily basis? Or?
It's all around IT really.
Okay.
I work for a company that ships goods, IT channel goods really, but could be anything. So during COVID, we've done quite a bit for NHS and Department of Education and stuff like that, which has been quite nice to be involved with. But it's computers really. I'm responsible for the whole IT side of the business in terms of infrastructure and internal facing stuff. So yeah.
So is it been fairly stressful at this time, or is it something that because of the situation you've been able to actually sort of get into it and actually enjoy doing it because you are helping in the long term make things hopefully an improvement on what obviously it's been over the past 12 months or so?
Yeah, it's a good question. Has it been stressful? It's one of them, I think, where some people have chosen to survive, to try and survive throughout this pandemic from a business point of view. There's some people that give up. There's some people that didn't have an option. I'm quite pleased really from our business's point of view. We've tried to change. We've taken the opportunity to change, adapt, improve, perhaps step back and look at the business a bit, think about how more efficient it could be. The challenge that comes with that and what does make it stressful is everybody working from home and being distant. So I've worked around implementations of IT all my life, and the last 10 years before I started where I am now, I was on the road a lot, but you were always with people. You were in offices, you had people in rooms, you had meetings in person, and it's a bit easier to do it that way because it's like us now sat here. It's okay because we've got the cameras on and we can see what's happening. But when you're in these online meetings where you can't see people, you can't see their facial expressions, you can't see their attitude, you can't see, and sometimes people are too nervous to shout up in those situations. Whereas if you were in a room, you could read that person's behavior, you could perhaps explore a bit more around what they feel uncomfortable with in terms of what you're trying to do. And you can solve it, whereas where we are today, that's probably only going to come to the front when it's actually working in real life. And then you find out, oh, there was something that we didn't know. So this is the first time I've ever tried to do what we're doing at work in terms of implementation remotely. Everybody's remote. I'm actually still going to the office, and I have done throughout. I've not worked at home at all throughout the whole pandemic. So, and the reason for that is we've got a warehouse that's shipping, as I said, to the NHS and places like that. So we can't close it down. So I chose to go to the office, but it's been my team has grown in that time, which is a positive, and we're doing a lot. We are doing a lot of work, and we've got some big projects on the horizon now. And I'm not sure whether we'd have perhaps been at this point had there not been a pandemic. It's just meant that we've reprioritized and took the time to change, which is very, very positive for me personally.
Yeah, obviously nobody wanted something like this to happen, and it's by far out of the imagination that we ever thought something like this would happen. But no, it's good that some people have and businesses have been able to. I'm not saying they wanted this, but they have at least been able to do something to help themselves not only survive as a business, but refocus, realign what possibilities they could have, and in a way, it's actually structured themselves better off. So it's great to hear that. But some obviously, as we're going to find out, you've been involved in Autograss for a long time, but you've sort of taken on the side now of doing a bit of work on race cars. Obviously, you've been working on your own race cars for forever since you started as such. But you started to now do a little bit. I noticed at the few events that was able to take place last year, 1 or 2 cars coming up with the John Shorter Motorsport name on the car. So is this something sort of a bit like a getaway from work on other times? And I guess, is this something that you enjoy on the actual mechanic side of working on race cars and doing this?
We moved to where we are in 2016, and I was right in the middle of trying to get my head around pickup truck racing at that time. And the reason we moved here was because I'd got a 13-ton race transporter, I'd got the pickup truck, and I wanted somewhere where I could get a workshop to get all that in and out of sight. So up until that time, the pickup truck was living at my dad's, the lorry was living at Martin Gould's in his yard, and it was just a struggle trying to go anywhere, trying to sort stuff out. There was always trips all over the place. Coming home from Brands Hatch at midnight and driving a 13-ton truck through a housing estate was
yeah, not ideal.
That's not well appreciated. So we found this place where we are now, and I had the workshop built, and right now I've got the best facility I've ever had, but unfortunately I don't have anything myself to put in it. So with the transporter gone, the pickup truck's gone, it left a space where there was stuff to do. It does take me away from work. It's nice to have that time away, and I've always enjoyed that with racing. I seem to have always had fairly high pressure jobs, I would say. So it's quite nice now because I get home every night. I see my daughter every night, which is great. But in, what is it now, 3.5 years ago, for the 10 years before that, I could be away 5 days a week, all through my kind of probably most successful time at Autograss. I was working away during the week, which left pressure on my dad to sort the car out, especially if there was a quick succession of meetings or bash rounds. All of the work really was done by him. I wouldn't get home till late on a Friday night. I might get a Saturday if we've got a Sunday meeting, but if it was a bash round, I'd be getting home late Thursday, loading the car up Friday morning and going racing. So yeah, the idea is we've got this facility, everything's in there, all the kit we need. So I just started talking to a few people. I don't really advertise all that much. I know we've got the Facebook page, but it's more word of mouth work, and I just try to help people. I'm not even in it to make any money out of it because I've got a full-time job. It's just quite nice helping people. I don't really want to lose touch with the sport either, if I'm honest, because it is quite easy. When I was right in deep with the pickup trucks, that was your focus, and it was all I was really doing. It was all I was working on, and I'd get to the odd nationals, but I couldn't afford that time because I needed to be doing everything on the pickup truck I could, really.
Yeah, well, we're going to look into a little bit about that later on, because it'd be nice to obviously see what your experiences was like in a different motorsport discipline. But we mentioned obviously why we're here is to talk about your Autograss life mainly. But you mentioned your dad a lot, who was obviously as your dad, he's been a massive influence on your life and your racing career. But did it all start with him in Autograss or jalopy racing or whatever it was called back then, or any form of motorsport? Did it start with your dad, who was a keen racer, or did the motorsport go through an earlier generation?
No, it was my dad, so I'm second generation really. My dad was a Class 3 racer back in the late 70s, early 80s, just around the time I was born. And he started as a mechanic for a good friend of his, Jim Lloyd, racing a Ford Anglia in Class 3 back in the day. I think that was for SWMBR, which would have been Shropshire and West Midland Bangor Racing, I think that stood for.
Okay.
And that was basically Shropshire and Telford autograss racing in its jalopy days, or early days, if you want to call it that. So my dad was a mechanic. He used to race his Ford Anglia number 21. So it kind of, that's where the 22 number come from. Dad decided he wanted to have a go himself, so he bought a Mark 1 Escort, and he's always done everything is himself. My dad, he's always built the engines, the cars. He's mechanically minded. He was a plant fitter as a was kind of young age, and he's always done that stuff. And he'd race crew with the hot rods on a Saturday night. He'd bring it home. If it needed another engine in it, he'd put an engine in it, and then the following day he'd go racing at Shropshire and Telford, as it was at Red Hill, or he'd go to Black Park at North Shropshire. There's lots of stories from back then. And he finished, I think it was 82. And he said to me, or he told me all the time I was growing up, that the reason he gave up was because I was bored, and money becomes tight and all the rest of it. And it's only quite recently he said that actually he'd invested quite a bit in his last Mark 1 Escort that was in Class 3, and he'd moved the radiator to the back and done a load of work on the engine, and he couldn't stop it overheating. And it sounds like he just come to a point where he couldn't figure it, and he decided to sell it. So that was it really after 82. But then for me, I remember that. Well, I don't remember that time because I was only 2, but I look back at the pictures, and there's lots of stories from that time. But we went to every men's nationals, lots of local meetings, stubble meetings as they were in Shropshire during the 80s. There was only 1986 nationals I missed between, I think it was 82 and 2016. There was only the 1986 nationals we didn't go to. So Sherborne is probably the first nationals that I really remember.
88, I think that was.
88, I think that was. Was that the one Janet Ellis won?
No, same venue. That was 4 years later in 92, but it was same. As far as I know, it's the same track.
And I remember a mini pickup going through the fence at a big time.
That was in '89. I think that was Tardby.
It was Tardby. So
Tardby. There we go. So it's great that you've got some memories from these early years there. I mean, my first nationals wasn't until '98. So and this is the thing. So this is why I've sort of quite taken a lot of time trying to collect all this autographs footage. And I mean, there isn't really memorabilia in autographs, not like other motorsports. You get programs, photos, and videos, and unfortunately,
badges. There was the so-on badges for each of the nationals. I seem to remember.
Yeah. Yes, they were. They were. Yeah. So it's stuff like that I'm really fascinated in, because I came into when the sport was starting to boom a bit more. I sort of was a bit late coming along to it, so I'd sort of really want to learn back and just see how things were back then. But for you've obviously witnessed autographs from these early times, and as I say, it's great that some memories have stuck out with you. Quick question there, sort of between from the memories you've got to, so let's say when the end of your junior career, what would you say was your favourite nationals that you remember? What one would be most memorable to you? Obviously, you raced as a junior in a couple, but are there any
my junior career? You're saying there?
Yeah, sort of before you graduated to senior racing. What would you say would be the most memorable national? I mean, we'll come on to your junior racing in a moment, but what would sort of be the most memorable nationals event you recall?
Yeah, good question. I think it's got to be Sherborne. I don't know quite why, because it's right on the edge of me remembering things, I suppose. But I seem to remember it being a massive venue. and it was good racing. I was always a bit of a fan of Bumble in Class 7.
Okay.
And I know that perhaps goes against the grain in terms of Jeff Oggu. Boss Oggu was obviously fantastic as well, and there was quite a few people in the mix back then. But Bumble, for me, I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was the cars, and he had a couple of different colours. I think he had blue with the red and yellow, and it was the black.
Yeah.
Fiestas and stuff that he had. And I think, but I might be wrong, that's probably going back to Sherborne. I have vague memories of Ludlow Nationals in '85, I think.
85, yeah. I've got that on DVD. In fact, I've got nearly all of them on DVD. Ironically, the only one I haven't got on DVD is 86.
There we go. If you look at the 85 one, my mum and dad were interviewed in the crowd on that, and you'll see me as a very little blonde-haired lad sat in the chair next to them whilst they're being asked about what they think about the such like. I think Dixter first surfaced that on Facebook a few years ago and asked me if it was me.
We'll have another look at that. Yeah. I'll see if I can find it myself when we get round to it. And to be honest, taking away from what we've got planned, that's something I really enjoy with looking back on these autographs DVDs. It's not just the racing footage. I think there should be more interaction with the crowds on race events like that, and that's why I try and do with what I do at the race meetings. I like walking around and catching people off guard and seeing what their experience is like at the time. But yeah, we'll definitely try and find you.
The Nationals always seem to be special, so I'm a bit old school perhaps in my thinking here, is that whilst the Baths has obviously been great for the sport and you can't knock it, and more recently the UK as well, back then, and I don't know if it was because I was young, but the Nationals always felt very special. It was a weekend that made the hairs stand up on your arms and stuff. And for me later on, again, it could be age, or because I was racing competitively, it felt like another Baths round.
Yeah.
Quite often I'd go to the Nationals and it'd be like, well, yeah, but it's not much different. I think Evesham have done it differently in the last Nationals. I wasn't there, unfortunately, but a lot of people I've spoken to since then said there was something else. There was another element that they added to that.
Yeah, I mean, no disrespect to any of the people who have hosted the Nationals in more recent years. And because of the way the world is, it's very difficult to try and get Nationals on virgin fields like it traditionally was. And I think that's where some of the magic slightly went as well. When people would actually have a Nationals event on a track nobody has raced on before. So it gives that completely level playing field going into it. And as I say, no disrespect to any of the clubs and the hosts of these events, because we're now in a geographical way that it's not really possible to find these new venues to do it all because of how the way it is. But yeah, I definitely agree. Nationals it will always remain to me that one event above all others.
Yeah, definitely.
And as we're going to discuss, when something happens which is memorable, it stays with you forever. And like I said, we are going to talk about that. But first, we're going to talk about your junior introduction. Now, back then, it was 14 to 16-year-olds. So, was you keen and actually want to have a go before you got to that age? Do you remember?
I pestered my mum and dad for a race car from probably the age of 9, knowing what years that we could race. So I actually got it in the Christmas of '91. So I wasn't old enough. I was 11, just turned 12. And my dad raced it for 2 years. Got the bug in class 1 of it. And at the end of the second year, he built himself a new one, and I inherited the old one.
Okay.
So, my first meeting was at Star in March '94, and I remember there was Lee Everson. He was in juniors at that time. Ian Roberts, who was obviously sadly we've lost Ian now, but Ian was a fast driver in his day as well. We had Adam Edwards was racing Percy's class 1 in juniors. it was a fair field. I think there might have been 2 heats of us. Neil Stokes was racing as well. Andy Warrener, who I'm doing his class 5 for now, we raced.
So some really quick kids then to try and learn again straight away.
At a club level, and it was wet. They just moved the track to where it is now, so that was the first year that it had moved from a different configuration on the field, and so it was grass. It was wet, and I finished 3rd, not too far away from Lee Everson, and I think Adam Edwards was 2nd. And I thought, well, okay, yeah, we're not too bad. But then I think as a 14, 15-year-old, your head perhaps gets a little bit with everything else that's going on in life. So the first year I didn't do anything. We didn't really travel back then, to be honest. So it was more club meetings. We did go to the Nationals, which I think were at Bristol in '94. And I think Ian Roberts won that, although unfortunately his engine was deemed not correct. So was it Mark Lloyd, I think, took the Nationals?
No, I think Mark Lloyd won his. I'm trying to recall now myself. It might have been one of the Middletons from Ludlow.
Was the Middletons, Craig Middleton?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, back then, obviously, you had the traditional open meetings, but it wasn't like how the open meetings evolved into the Baz round as such, where you didn't have to travel to these meetings. You would go if it was a localish open.
Yeah.
So you might have travelled to maybe the West Midland Open because it wasn't as fair a stretch as going to the Southern Open as such. And with only 3 years then, 14 to 15, 16-year-old, did you find you learnt a great deal in that first year or so, or did you only start to click after that first year? And
it was definitely after the first year, I would say, getting into the second year. My last year in juniors, in fact, I only had 2 years. I was 14, turned 15 at the end of the first year, so I was 15. I turned 16 at the end of the second year, so I only had 2 years. And to be honest, it was only really my nationals in my second year that things started to happen. And that was because Border Counties Festival the weekend before that nationals, I think I'd been in the beer tent or I'd been up late, or I wasn't really, my head wasn't in it. We went racing. My dad kind of took me to one side after one of my heats where I made myself look like a fool, and he said, enough's enough. We're either coming racing or you're not interested. You need to make your mind up, because I'm not dragging the car around the country for you to. I think his words were, I could push a shopping trolley faster than you can drive that car. So it kind of hit home. I had a few days to think about it, and then we went to South Wales for the nationals the following weekend, and a win and 2/3 in the heats, and just missed the final by a point. It was ninth. No, it would have been 11th qualified. And the year after that, I think they brought in semi-finals for the juniors.
Well, that was one of my questions, because there in the juniors there wasn't 150 minis all trying to get into it, and this is sort of why they did bring in the knockout stages, which I think it's a lot of pressure on these kids doing that now, but. Obviously, at the time before, when you were doing it, you could only do your 3 heats and hope for the best. And now a first and 2/3, you would think would be pretty good. Getting you in there, you can't put much wrong. No. And do you recall how you felt then as a kid when you realised that you were so close to the final? And I'm pretty with the being semi-finals, which was the year after '96, they brought them in because numbers was growing. With missing out, would you have been in support of semi-finals back then, do you reckon?
Yeah, I think so. But it's easy for me to say that since looking back, because there's been at least 2 BAS finals that I've not qualified for, but I've finished in the top 2. Yeah. So anything can happen, can't it? When you're into a race, anything can happen. I think I went MAP when they had a 3-dayer on at MAP. I think I was in class 3 that year, and I think I was 15th, and we had semi-finals because of the number of cars. I think I was at least 15th. So I'd had a black flag in one heat, and I made the final.
Yeah.
So it just proves that anything can happen with semis. I mean, I was chuffed that I'd picked my act up, because we were in amongst some really good cars at the time. Tarek Cornell that year was fast. Unfortunately, another one that isn't with us anymore.
Yeah.
And he was a grand lad. He was a great lad. And, you know, some of my heats were against some top cars, and I'd managed to perform well. So off the back of that, I thought, yeah, I'm doing all right. And my following year was in Class 1. My dad had bought the Class 4. So I was racing the Class 1. And in the Shropshire League then we had, so we were into 96 by this point. So we got Percy, we got Wayne Price, who were already in Class 1. There was me, there was Ian Roberts, there was Lee Everson.
Yeah.
Quite a few cars. And I actually finished fourth in the qualifying, after the qualifying rounds. And they only took 3 through to the Nationals. But in fairness, Percy and Wayne, and that was the year Wayne won it, they were both in the final as well. So I kind of felt that I was probably getting towards the sharp end, but it was taking me a while to get there at the same time.
Yeah. I suppose in a way, this we're in more today. Why with the juniors, they're getting a couple more years. They're going to get even more now before they can graduate to the seniors. I suppose it pretty much sets them ready, doesn't it, for when they go in. But when you only had 2 years, and then straight away after that you're jumping in with the big guns, who may have had, I mean, it can happen now, like they can have 20 years more experience on you. But when you've only had 2 to sort of, the first year is to find your feet, and the second year is to try and improve. Next minute you're making that big step. So I can understand and respect why you obviously felt satisfied that you'd done well enough against these big names, because Shropshire it's one of the pinnacle areas really for talent in many classes. So with your junior career then being as short as it was the Nationals your standout moment really, even though obviously you were so close?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, definitely. There are a couple of things. I remember my first heat win. That was at Ludlow. I think that was on a virgin field that day. My dad had a win in Class 1, and because we were sharing the same car at that time. And I took my first win in juniors, and I think my dad made the final that day of Class 1 as well. And being down in the West Midland League was as challenging as it was being in Shropshire. And plus the Shropshire boys went down there as well. So you were in for some good racing that weekend. But yeah, it was really the Nationals. We didn't travel. I mean, it was 95, so it was before the Bass. I'm not sure if we might have done MAP, but we weren't really travelling much further than the West Midland League or the Shropshire League really at that time.
Yeah, and I suppose that's the other thing, isn't it, with this? I mean, yeah, you are close to 2 very competitive areas. I mean, ironically, again, I've been watching a couple of meetings I've got from the 96 Bass, the first year that the British Autograph Series took place. And Class 1, it was always West Midland and Shropshire. Yeah. It was only them 2 leagues that were in it.
Yeah.
So Wayne, Percy, then you've got
Jabez,
Mutley, and a few others, and they were the 2 areas. So you definitely had plenty to learn from when you're in there. But so how long did you stay in Class 1? Because you soon
just 1 year.
Just 1 year, and
just
then
1 year.
And then had your dad decided that it was on retirement part 2, because you soon went into the Class 4 and took that on?
So the Class 4 he bought, I think, he raced the Class 4 at the Nationals in 96 in the West Midland League. So he must have bought that at the end of my junior career. That came about from a guy called Jeff Reed, who was a competitive North Shropshire driver, but he didn't race anywhere else but North Shropshire. But it was a quick car, and unfortunately he passed away. And his mom was looking to sell the stuff. Basically, he got barns full of things. So we went along, and my dad bought that. He raced it for 12 months, and then I think we reshelled it before I started racing it. But we did take it to Evesham for a club meeting at the end of 96, which was my first meeting in it. So straight away, I'm in with Neil Corbett, Phillips, and
who obviously won that. Like Neil won the Nationals in '96.
Yeah, and that was what my dad said. Well, you better go and pitch yourself in at the sharp end and see what you're going to do with it. So we went there, and it was I was 3 straight heats. I think I might have had 5th and 6th or something, but I was surprised at the difference in speed because the Class 4 minis were screamers, 10-inch wheels. They were fast in their day. So we went and did that, and I said, okay, I'll race it next year. And Dad kind of stepped down from driving, although he did race it on the odd occasion. In fact, he raced it at North Shropshire 2 weeks before one of my nationals and rolled it in an open, which put us under a bit of pressure to get it straight and square again. But then I took it over, and my first nationals with it was '97, which was back down in South Wales, I think.
Yeah.
Qualified. Got Kathy Allington, I think, was racing with the men back then. There were some fast cars in our league in Class 4 at that time. Brian Chamberlain was in there.
Was there a class which didn't have fast cars in it?
Well, not really. Not at Shropshire, I suppose. I managed to qualify, and I went down there and made a run-off for the final.
Yes.
I was really chuffed. Our first men's nationals, never raced it. And that was when I was starting to think, blimey, I remember being a kid at these nationals, watching these boys race, thinking, this is what it's all about, autographs, it's nationals, it's the top cream of the country, this is where you need to be. And suddenly I was in it. And that was very different to juniors because we hadn't really followed juniors or the ladies nationals in the past. So being there myself, and unfortunately me and Keith Adams had a coming together in the runoff, and despite us complaining, he managed to get through to the final rather than me at the time. So that was slightly disappointing, but still, to come away having been in a runoff for 10th place for my first national final, I was pretty chuffed with that. Yeah,
I mean, you seem to obviously settle in fairly quickly then into the car. If you started at the end of '96 and then straight in '97, and as you say, some very, very quick cars in the Shropshire area.
Yeah.
In Class 4. And to be honest, I think when you watch any footage back of Class 4 racing, sort of from around the mid-90s to the early 2000s, it was quite a period, really, of mega Class 4 racing. And, I like to be in that mix. You've certainly got to be quite confident going into it. But you had quite a stretch of a Class 4 career, and it seems to be one that you have enjoyed. I suppose after '97, was that when you started to really travel a bit more and do a bit more and probably race at the bars and do more open meetings? You'd even go as far as racing like the Nottingham Winter Series.
Yeah.
Was that all part of sort of keeping yourself sharp so that you're ready for the next race against the top guys?
Yeah. I think, I think 98 was a write-off year for me, most of 99. I just got my first job. It was a fairly challenging job. I kind of didn't know what had hit me, and I think perhaps at the time I was more focused on that than I was on racing. So I made the nationals. Yeah, I made the nationals in 98 and 99, but nothing to really speak of in terms of any results. I didn't make a final. And then I seem to remember us being at Hereford in 99. I don't know if that was a Bass Round or a West Mid Open, and I made the final. And I'd had a good day there. But in the final, I had a coming together with... might have been Keith Adams again, actually, in the first corner. And what I didn't realise at the time, it had split an oil pipe.
Right.
And when I finished the race, there was a bit of damage to the motor, which we didn't actually learn about until the end of the year. And then we went to the Nottingham Winter Series, which was the last one held at, I can't remember the name of the place now, but the one on the side of the M1.
It was Moor Green.
Moor Green, that's right.
Yeah.
And it was me and Tom Kings in his Moo.
Oh, yeah, in the M, yeah.
And basically for all the 3 rounds, it was just me and him, and it was some awful conditions. I mean, I remember Ted having to take like 2 or 3 foot out of the track the one meeting just to get it to run with the scraper. And it was one of them. Tom was always first to the corner, and then I had the challenge of passing him, and that was a great sparring time, really. And what I didn't realise until the last round was that it was between me and Derek Lynch to win the overall Winter Series.
Right.
So I started taking a bit of a vested interest in what Derek Lynch was doing. And at that time, it wasn't odds and evens. You were running 1 to 10.
Yeah, so you could sit on the start line and actually watch his race and know how he'd do.
Yeah, and it was only because Grassing Grandad beat him in 1 heat that I won all my heats during the Winter Series. He won all but 1. And that was what made me overall Winter Series champion at the end of '99, which I was really chuffed about. I felt like that was quite an achievement, especially to do it with straight wins, and especially because I didn't lead any of them from the start line. I had to overtake, and that's something that's kind of stuck with me. I know Sal always says, it doesn't matter where you are when you get off the start line, if you seem to be able to pass people. And I guess it was them kind of times where, that started to happen. And then 2000 was really where we started to get the mix. So from 2000 to 2005, I didn't miss a national final. And I always felt that I should be in there. I should be, my best position was 4th. I broke a shaft. I had a wheel off. We broke a CV. There was all kinds of problems I had in the national final. The car would be 100% for the year, but the national final would be the one place that I'd do something with it. So I got to the end of 2005. I had a puncture in 2005 in the final at Yorkshire Dales in Class 4 in the pickup that year. I'd rolled that a few weeks earlier at Radford. I didn't like it particularly from going there from the saloon. And that was it. I just said, enough's enough. It's just not going to happen for me. I've tried too hard, and it just doesn't matter what I do. I just can't seem to get that win, unfortunately.
Well, with you mentioning about like the win series, I want to just throw this quick question in: the Mini versus the especially, it sounds like you really enjoyed those races with Tom King. So obviously, I always find it was always the same again with like, when Class 5 was still on that front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive battle, where the rear-wheel drives would shoot off to the first corner, leave the Minis half a straight behind, and then you just see them chip away. And like you Mini men, when you were chasing these rear-wheel drive cars, you're possessed, and you sort of really want to like really do these imps in and get them out of the way. Is that something you actually enjoyed, trying to, because you knew no matter what, it didn't matter how good your start was, they would always be away.
Yeah.
So is that something you actually relish, wanting to try and catch these imps and enjoy a battle with them?
Yeah, you always felt like the whippet, if you like, going after them. And Roger Gill, I think twice he stopped me from winning the Map Open, Roger Gill, with that imp of his. And that was just because he used to stop it in a corner on the polished, and there was nothing you could do. You couldn't ride around it. And I've never been the driver to push somebody out the way, if you like. I think there was a couple of times. But the number of times the Map Open was the one for me I would have liked to have won, because whilst the Nationals is great and it is, the pinnacle, don't get me wrong, and I'm very lucky to have been there and won a couple, but the Map, anybody could go. It wasn't about qualifying, anybody was there. And if you come out at the top at Map, you've done your best. You've done it as well as anybody could do. But there was Jabers, there was Roger Gill twice. I think Tom's dad, Dave. I think they all stopped me. I've got that many 2nd, 3rd, and 4th place trophies from Map in Class 4. Never to win, unfortunately.
Yeah, I suppose because there's the North of England Championships the week before, but the Map Open was like the first big Open where everybody went and that almost set themselves up for the year. So I can understand that. But I do think it's great because you've got that other aspect when it's Mini versus imp, because you've got, if you've got say 2 or 3 imps in the race, then the Minis have sort of got to then battle to see who's going to be the first of the Minis, because that gives them the best chance of actually winning the race, because they're the first ones to try and get by the Imps. But no, I think it's fantastic to watch that sort of racing back when you get the rear wheel drives off and then the gaggle of minis all elbowing themselves apart and trying to see who can get up there first. But we want to come back to your nationals, and yeah, unfortunately in Class 4 it didn't end up the way you wanted it, but you did get 2 4th places, I believe, 2000 and 2003. At the time, how much did those achievements mean to you? Because, like I say, Class 4 was still in a very strong place, numbers wise and competitive wise. So how much did you rate those achievements at the time?
I think it first occurred to me at Yorkshire Dales 2003. Well, it was let's go back to 2000. My first national final in 2000 was the most nerve-wracking thing I've ever been in my life, because the first thing that flashed into my mind was, as a kid, my mum and dad always used to sit at the end of the first straight, and I remember pulling onto the line at Landau, looking down there, and thinking, I used to be the kid that was stood at the other end of this straight.
I was going to say, surely you couldn't have seen them sat there from that distance.
No, but I was thinking, I used to be the one who was stood outside thinking, these boys are the top notch now. We're in final time. You know, this is where it's all going to happen. And that was a special moment in some ways, nerve-wracking, but a special moment to think I'd achieved it. So, yeah, 2000, that was a good national final. There were some quick cars. I think Phil Olsen won it in the end. Was that 2000?
He won it in 01. Your other mate, Neil Corbett, won it in 2000 and 2003.
Yeah, and 2003, yeah. That reminds me of it. But then 2003, I made it finish 4th. I think I had a tangle with Tony Appleton in the first corner, or else I could have possibly finished a bit further up. I was always having good races with Carl Proctor, and he got away from me a bit in that race because of the tangle. But I remember getting on the truck, and that was another experience altogether, because you're driving round, and I got 4th. Oh, this is great. And then I could see people who were like trying to get my attention and wave and putting their thumbs up and saying, well done. And that was another special moment, I suppose. I hadn't won it, but it was nice to see people. I've never been somebody who likes to get in the middle of, a crowd or something, or I don't feel I'm a character that draws people in as such, but it was nice to feel in some ways appreciated, or people were saying well done, that I'd never had that really before. And that was quite a big confidence builder in 2003. But then it just didn't happen after that. 2004 at Stroud, I ended up putting a diff in on the Saturday night because I'd had diff problems. I had to go home. I think Mosley had gone home to get engines that weekend as well.
Yeah, it was the engine breaker, wasn't it? At Javelin Park.
It was diff breaker for me. Put a diff in it, and then somebody had put sugar in my petrol on the Sunday or the Sunday morning, and that was another final where I didn't really get anywhere, and that was a bit of a shame. But 2005, then we were back at Yorkshire Dales. We'd built the mini pickup, thought that we'd be somewhere sharp at the sharp end. We did have good heats, had a good race with Jeff Pinkney and passed him in the one heat, and I thought we're probably in with a good chance this weekend. And the only hole on the track I found in the final and pushed the tyre off the rim. So it was at that time I just turned to my dad and I said, I can't do it anymore. The desire's gone away from me. I don't think I'm ever going to win it. I think 2004 I won a Bass round, and here's one for you as a stat. I think I'm possibly the only person in Autograss who didn't qualify for the final and won it without crossing the checkered flag.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was a 2004 Class 4 final at South Wales Bass.
Right.
So it just didn't seem to happen. I've never really done well at the Bass. I think 4th is perhaps my best. Both 4 and 3. But that was the end of Class 4, really, I suppose.
Had you actually fell out of love with the class itself, or did you just think it wasn't Class 4? You just needed a change. Is that
Class 3?
Class 4 was still fairly strong at the time.
Yeah, it was.
But
I've got a Citroen AX in the garage at the time. That was the route I was thinking of going down. And my heart had always been Class 3. Dad had done Class 3.
really, I was going to come on to this actually next.
There's just something about standing at a nationals and watching that first heat of threes come off the line when it's a grassy start line, and
when they all spin.
Yeah, but just hearing that horsepower. I think Mark Hoppe used to say as a commentator, "Here comes 1,000 horsepower off the line," or something. And there is something about Class 3, and I've always felt, and I've raced in quite a lot of classes, but I've always felt that it's probably one of the most difficult to drive, because it is the only class in the sport where the engine isn't over the drive wheels. You know, your engine's at the front, you're driving at the back. There's no other class that does that anymore. You know, everything else is either front wheel drive or it's rear wheel drive with the engines in the back. And I think there's a science to it. You know, I speak to a few well-known constructors in the sport, and they say they're not interested in it. It's a science, and they don't want anything to do with it. Basically, they don't want to learn it, if you like. So 3 was always where I was going to end up, I think.
Well, I was gonna come on to this, and before you actually sent me through any information, I didn't even know that Class 3 began back with your dad. I didn't actually know about that, but I grew up as a Class 3 kid, because that's what my dad always did. Not successfully by any means, but like even in our league back in the early to mid 90s, we would go not necessarily so much to Scunthorpe, because Scunny was a tiny club back then, but to the showground. And on club meetings, we'd be getting 4 heats of Class 3s. And I think there's that buzz. I mean, no disrespect to Class 1, because it's an amazing class. It's the class which anybody can get into and all that, but it's just that difference, isn't it, when you're going from little minis which you can barely hear on the start line to the first class with some, and you think, wow, there's some serious power there. So like I said, I didn't realise that Class 3 began before you as such. So I take it, obviously, with the end of Class 4, timing felt right to make that change. So what I'm going to say, we're going to sort of go around literally in a circle again. Class 3, Shropshire has got probably the best lineup of Class 3s you could see. And it's been like that for about 30 years. I take it you really wanted to try and be a part of that, because, I mean, watching in the 90s, I mean, if you were watching them in the 90s, I mean, you had Tipton, Dave Allmark, you have Bob Matthews, you've got Leon Dorset, you've got even some of the guys lesser known. You had Derek James. There was a load more as well. Ian McDonald. We could keep. Sorry.
Super Mac, as they used to call him.
Yeah. I've still got footage of him at the '97 North of England, an absolutely epic race he had, which he nearly won. But yeah, Shropshire, what is it about that area? Obviously, then later on, Martin Gould would emerge as a major force in it, and now Sam and
Pete Robinson was in there as well. Pete Robinson was the star.
Yeah. I mean, what is it about that region? It's amazing, isn't it? And I take it that's why you had that interest, I suppose, because of how you had all these top drivers in these classes, and you had to be a part of it. So what did you think when you finally got a car and you was amongst it? What was your feelings?
We didn't buy a complete car, so we bought a rolling shell basically off Lee Ormond. It was a car he'd raced with a Volvo engine in it, and I bought the rolling shell off him, and we had to go our own way with the motor. I think I bought the gearbox off him as well. But I remember to this day, my dad said to me, "These boys are spending money. They've got Millington motors in there, some of them." And he says, "We're not going to be competing at that level." Because I was still quite reliant on my dad, really, I suppose, from well, not so much financial point of view. I paid for some of it as well, but he was a big part of it. And you know, I was reliant on him for his knowledge. He'd done it before. He knew how these things worked. He knew how these things went together. And yeah, I remember him saying to me, you know, we're not going to be competing at national level, but you know, if you hold your own, you'll be all right. So yeah, it was a bit of a wake up call, I suppose, getting involved in that. And I did take it to the Bass the first year I was racing it. We went to a Bass round. I think it was South Wales kicked the year off that year, and I did all right. I remember having a good race with Tanga at the time, and I didn't make a final, but I was there or thereabouts. I mean, club meetings, qualifying rounds, you couldn't get better racing than you got at start. It was like a national final. It was like a national final. Just being on the tail end of them in some ways was pretty amazing. My first race in Class 3 was very wet, actually, which kind of helped in some ways. But yeah, it was a steep learning curve. And it was only really the beginning of 2009 that I'd invested a bit in the setup of the car. We'd changed the rear axle configuration, and I'd still got an 8-valve 2.2 engine in it, Vauxhall engine. And we went to Nottingham, and again, it was me and Tanga really. And in the final, I raced him. He was winning, I was second, and I finally passed him round the outside on the last lap and won the final. And I thought, oh, okay, that's pretty good. I'll take that. You know, that's I was doing all right there. And then went to the first Bass, I think it was Evesham that year, and made the final.
Oh, okay.
And, again, I was thinking, oh yeah, this is good. You know, I want a bit more of this. But I was aware then that the 16 valves were really coming on in leaps and bounds as a motor.
Yeah.
So before Stroud Bass, we bought a 16-valve engine. I think it was up your way, to be honest. A guy had it in a Class 9, and then he put it in a kit car, and then he was selling the engine on its own. So no, this is no word of a lie. We went and paid, I don't know, 850 quid for this engine. Took it straight to Paul Exxon. I said, put steel rods in it, put the engine management right, get the carbs set up, dyno it. I'll have it back for Stroud Bass, which was July, just before the Nationals, and we'll give it a run. So we did that. I bet that engine cost me 1,500 quid. So we went to Stroud Bass, had a good race with Adrian Joyce, didn't make the final, but I thought, yeah, we're doing all right. And then, of course, Radford was the Nationals. I'd been working in Scotland. It was my first Nationals I qualified for in Class 3. There was me, Bob Matthews, and Martin Gould, I think.
Yes.
And it was wet. And I'd got an old set of 15-inch, very narrow Monarch tyres, Hacker pattern tyres that I put on the back of it, and won the first heat. And I'd never particularly bothered too much about the wet. So I won the first heat. Then I put it on RB1s for the second heat. Spun out, I think finished 6th.
Yeah.
And, I was really annoyed with myself on the Saturday night. I thought, I've thrown it away. You know, I could see my heat. My third heat was Lee Ormond, Bob Matthews, a few others, and I thought, you know, that's a big ask to go and win your third heat to give you a shout.
Yeah.
And anyway, it dried up, didn't it, for the Sunday? Put Alaskas on it. I thought I couldn't even get to the start line. You know,
the track had dried and gone hard on like 3/4 width.
But
the start line was still very wet and soft because that was actually the first year I qualified in Class 9, and everybody was out there putting RB1s on to get off the start, and you thought, well, if you can get off the start, you've got an advantage, and then you can sort of hold your own. And we didn't have that. We weren't going to buy some RB1s. We were just sticking with what we had. and I remember I'd had a couple of fourths or whatever, and then in my last heat, I didn't get off the line because the RB1 cars got away. But I did actually end up winning the race. But then to sour it, I got a green flag for hitting a cone. But I would have actually ended up 9th. So I'm actually happy that I got the green flag because I ended up about 14th and I didn't feel so bad. But I didn't realise you'd actually made a Baz final at Evesham. I thought the national final was your first big final in Class 3. I didn't realise you'd actually made the Evesham Baz.
Yeah.
So compared to the nerves in Class 4, what was it like reaching the national final in Class 3. Before we get to that race itself, how did you feel to have actually made the final?
Well, I was director in charge of the nationals that year.
You was.
I hadn't really thought a lot about it. There was a lot going on because of how challenging the conditions were. The drivers weren't happy about mud being piled up in front of the fence, and there was cars sliding off the track on the Saturday afternoon. If I'm honest, I wasn't that focused on racing. Not as focused as I should have been, I suppose. But I remember sitting on the line in the final. I thought, I've got a 1,500-pound engine. I've got probably the heaviest car out of all these others that are sat here. I'm underpowered compared to the rest of them. I was on grid 8 because I was the last qualifier, so I got the last choice of grid. I'm on grid 8. I've got nothing to lose. I don't think I'm going to do any good, but I've got nothing to lose. And rocketed out the gate. There was me, Derek Lynch and Phil Thompson to the first corner together. I was on the outside of them, and I was aware that something had gone on between Derek and Phil on the inside. And I popped out with him on the inside of me on the outside as we went down to the second turn. And I got in front of him and went on, won it. I didn't sink in. I didn't know what had gone on behind me. I hadn't been part of it. I hadn't touched anybody. I know Phil gave me a run towards the end of the race. I finished, and I remember Carl Jones being a marshal who stopped me on my way back into the pits. And Carl's, I've known Carl for many years. He's a good friend of my wife's family, and he stopped me and was like, I can't believe it. And he was patting me on the shoulder. I'd been working with Keith Matthews as a director. He was the next one I saw as I drove off the track. He was in tears. He probably won't admit it now, but he was very emotional. And then the next thing, Paul Cusack, who hadn't made the final, climbed the Harris fencing between the spectator area and the pit lane, if you like. And he come over the top of this Harris fencing shouting at me, and he was tipping lager in through the front of my helmet and covering me in lager and banging my head and everything else. And then Sky, I think, were there to do interviews straight after that. And it was just a roller coaster. And, well, getting back and parking in the pits, and Pete Haynes, who'd been in the final, I think he was racing Neil Corbett's car that weekend. He'd been involved in whatever had gone on behind me, and he come past me, and Pete's a gentleman. He always will be a gentleman. And he says, well done, John, but I've got to tell you, I'm off to put a complaint in. He says, it wasn't your fault, but I'm not happy with the way that final went. And it was a big tangle of cars. And you know what? That for me, still to this day, I don't particularly feel I deserve that national title. Just doesn't sit well with me when I watch it back video. Whilst I wasn't involved, there was also a lot of talk about me being a NASA director, and that's why the marshals didn't stop it for what happened on the first corner. And that wasn't true. Well, not as I'm aware of. I had no influence on it, and it's a title. I won't give it back, so to speak. I felt I won it fair and square in some ways, but at the same time, it wasn't a proper race, you know.
I would have to disagree, unfortunately. I watched it. I did watch it. I watched the video actually last week in prep for this, and the only fortunate thing I think for you is that second heat where it all went wrong, because you ended up with grid 8, and if you didn't have grid 8, you wouldn't have won that final.
I'd have been in the middle of what happened, you know.
You would, and I don't think it was a major incident. It certainly weren't the worst incident that there could have been, but it did result in about 4 cars all tangled on the first corner. But the fact is, the guys who were in that incident, they are highly respected racers in their own right, and they all rejoined the race. They didn't sit there, wait for the red flags. In fact, I think before you'd even completed that lap, the incident had cleared. So the marshals obviously put it down as a racing incident and let it go.
Yeah.
And I strongly feel that's how it was. I don't think really anybody was at fault. I mean, Radford's a tricky first corner at the best of times. It does narrow in as you go uphill. And I think, yeah, I wouldn't really say you could put it down as much to the conditions by that time. I can't remember if they did actually put any water on the track for the final, but I think it was one of those where there was enough grip out there for people to control themselves, but it was just a squabble into turn one. And I think what resulted after that was a fantastic duel for the lead. I'm not sure how much you realised about how it was around you, but watching it, Phil Thompson was actually in front for a brief moment on the last lap. So, are you confident in your own driving when you're in that sort of position? Obviously, it was the first time you was in that position in the nationals. But are you a confident driver, always focusing ahead, or are you one of those who kind of looks around to see where everybody is?
I've always had a mirror. I've always raced with a mirror, and some people say to me you shouldn't race with them because you spend too much time looking back. But I am always trying to move forward. I'm a different driver today than what I was back then. I don't think I think I let too many people off. I was too respectful, perhaps, towards others. And being in a different sport has taught me that. I was never the, if you watch Phil Cooper, for instance, Phil's a hard driver. Mark Grice as well. You watch them get into incidents and you think, well, I always thought to myself, I wouldn't have got involved in that. But now I realise, having been away from the sport and reflected on it, I realise that, well, with autographs, you've only got a very short time to make the move to get involved. And sometimes it's worth risking a black flag, a green flag because it could be a win. That's what you're looking at. And I was never like that. But yeah, with Phil, in fairness to Phil, he drove proper clean with me. I know Derek felt that he'd been spun out by Phil in the first corner or half spun, but he didn't. He gave me a bump going into the one corner, but it was nothing really. He could have won it. He could have gone past me. He could have won it. There was no doubt about it. I just hung on, kept the foot buried in the floor, and hoped for the best. And we just happened to come out and win it. So it's I appreciate what you say. It's just never really sat that well with me in terms of I don't know. I never particularly felt you deserve it. I don't know what means that you do deserve it, but that's just the way I felt at the time and still do in a way.
Yeah, I'm absolutely speechless on it because it's not
that I sound ungrateful, and I'm not. I'm proud of achieving it. I suppose it was just the way in which it happened, and the comments that I had further on down the line after that, via marshals and stuff, and it's just one of them.
I think that is very. I don't know what the word is, but the fact that people would think that you are influencing a use of power in a race which, in fairness, you had no involvement in the incident itself. If you were the one who would have gone in, spun Derek round, and then carried on in the lead and won the race, maybe so.
Yeah.
But the fact that you weren't even involved and you drove an inch perfect race, in fairness, Phil did find a way past you, but in fairness, your race couldn't have gone any better, I feel, watching it back now, all these years later. But I'm just speechless on the fact of how you are with it. I suppose we'll get to 2014 and we'll understand. Hopefully, that made it all better. But we'll get to that later. So, anyway, on a different note, going away from the event later on, the day, if you left the day after, and when you got back home and that, did it start to mean a bit more to you then on a personal note? Forget about what happened in the race, but the actual result itself of having your name in the book on the sheet with those amazing names who have won the nationals before. What did it actually mean to have your name amongst it?
It does mean a lot, and the the one person who I used to enjoy speaking to, you've mentioned him already, was Derek James. And Derek used to ring me sometimes after Bass rounds, or he'd ring me after a Nationals or something, and we'd have a chat for an hour on the phone. And I've got to say, I love Derek to bits. He feels like a family member. I haven't spoken to him for many years, unfortunately. I know he's been poorly more recently, but at the time, he was almost a great supporter of mine. Really, it felt to me as a fellow competitor as well. So I remember just speaking to people like him. I remember Tom Law, my family. My family were extremely proud, and you know, I certainly don't regret it. It's never been a comfortable thing with me. I really don't wish to sound ungrateful, because I'm not. It does mean a lot in Class 3, especially. I've always been proud of what the Shropshire League have achieved. That weekend, the three of us that qualified for the Nationals were in the final. You know, and I'd go to Bass rounds where there was 4 or 5 Shropshire cars had gone, and we'd be in the final. I remember that in South Wales in 2013, the first Bass round. All of us Shropshire drivers were in the final. More than half of the final was Shropshire cars.
Yeah.
And I've always been proud of that. And the racing, I mean, we've had fallouts with Bob Matthews. I've had fallouts with Kev Tipton. Me and Kev had a proper kind of spitting match the one day at Star, because he took me out. So the next race I took him out, and he comes and he said, I remember him, he was pointing at me through the window, and he said, "Don't ever, ever do that again." And I just put my hands up in the air like that, you know. And he come to me afterwards and he said, "All right, fair enough, tit for tat," kind of thing. It was heat of the moment. So yeah, we've had run-ins, but great racing as well. We always enjoyed racing at the Shropshire League, and I think that's probably the reason why the boys are so good, or they were so good in the day. I don't think there's so many of them now, but you were racing it week in, week out. And I relate this to pickup truck racing in terms of it was like a national final when you were at pickups every race. You were against the same people. You didn't look at the heat sheets and think, "Oh, I could probably do this in this heat, this in this heat." The final. You're against the final every time you go out, and that's exactly what it was like at Shropshire when you raced at qualifiers. So I think you naturally up your game in that kind of environment, if you like.
Yeah. Well, anyway, hopefully we can move on to a race now, which I hope you personally, actually, now going from that, enjoyed a bit more, because it seemed after the Nationals win, unknowingly or not, whatever, it seemed to be a lot more confidence in your own driving and ability, because a couple of weeks later you would make one of the most amazing races I think I've watched in the period of Class 3 racing, which again is another video on your YouTube thing, which was at Seven Valley. The Class 3 final, that was amazing. I watched it again. I watched it back last week, and when people said that Class 3 got boring because of the Toyota Starlets and the way you had to race them, you had to drive them, you couldn't throw them into corners and that. The fact that that Class 3 final, I think, well, that was your second best final, I think. And I think you might have only finished 4th. It was so close over the line. But what a race that was. What did you make of that, when, even if you watch it back now?
I remember pulling up at Seven Valley and driving down to the trailer park, and Jed Power got out of his camper and he was doing this at me, because it was the first meeting after the Nationals. And I drove past and I thought, I don't know if he's taking the piss or whether whether he's being respectful there. I wasn't sure. I just smiled at him and carried on driving. And I thought to myself at that point, I've got to, for myself, I've got to prove it to myself this weekend that we can make a final, that I can run at the sharp end. And I had 3 heats, 3 seconds, and I was 7th qualifier for the final. And that was Class 3. Back in those days, you had to be 130 points plus, really, to be certain that you were going to be in the final. And made it to the final. What a race. What a race.
Oh,
I led it. Lee led it. Derek Lynch led it. Leon Dorset led it. I
think Lee Alman led it.
Yeah, it was just And I've always said to this day that is one of my favourite races. I didn't win it, but
No.
boy, what a race to be involved
in. It was
and
incredible.
There was no ramming. There was no. We all tried different lines. The cars were fast. The track was fast. Yeah, it was just brilliant. And I felt leaving there that I had proved it to myself that I could run at the sharp end of Class 3. Strange as it seems,
Yeah.
From the two.
I mean, I will share it again. I know I shared it not long back. You actually shared it again, even though it was off your YouTube bit I nicked it from. But it's just one of those, and you just like, you watch lap 1 and you think, well, that's it now. But no, lap two's different. The person who was winning is now 5th, and then the person who was 4th is now leading, and it was just, and I mean, then you'd think, well, Derek's got in front now, and the race is done. And it's not, and it just changes again and again. And I don't know what happened that day, but it was an amazing race. And I think if anybody wants to watch, not just Class 3 but autograss race, that is a race to use, because that is 110% respect between each competitor, and the track and the conditions, and like I say, it's just one of the most amazing races I've ever seen, and I'm pleased that you feel like you got a reward in yourself about it by being a part of it.
I left that meeting thinking, okay, so I was probably concerned that the Nationals was also going to look like a complete fluke, if you like, which often it is. There is a lot of luck involved in winning a national title, but then going there, racing, I mean, my second heat with Derek on the Saturday afternoon, me and him, there was nothing between us. I've got a picture that was in the Supergrass calendar, I think, in the top corner, me and him. The cars looked pretty similar anyway, but there was just nothing between us. And I pushed him all the way to the finish, and I thought, he's no slouch. Derek was my hero in Class 3. I'd watched him for many years. I think he was a lot of people's heroes. He was Mr. Class 3, still is perhaps. So to have a race like that with him, and I remember him coming to me in the pit smiling, as Derek always did, and he said, "Oh, it was a good race. It was a good race." And it was just that weekend for me was a massive confidence builder, really. Not that I should have needed one, I suppose, but it was for myself.
Yeah, well, personal confidence is something that you need in racing, isn't it? Because the problem is, when in autograss racing, you have so much time at a Baz round anyway, especially for national. You have so much time between each race. You would think like you've got all that time in the world to sort of, whatever your first result is or the previous result is, you can take it away, pick yourself up, get ready for the next one. But it's really easy to let it settle on you, isn't it? And then before you know it, your next race is ready. Yeah. And you've not prepped yourself in it. And then you start to defeat yourself, isn't it? And confidence is a massive thing that is needed. And they're the type of races that you do need. Yeah. What would proving the point to yourself go into the following year then? I mean, we're skipping straight onto the Nationals again, and you were put in a highly respectable title defence, and after all these years of trying in Class 4, and you got two trophies out of it for 4th place, you would then go into the 2010 Nationals, and you would finish 3rd. So I think definitely a respectable defence and a performance. How did that result reflect on you then? Was you pleased with that? Despite, obviously, nobody wants to come down from a national in the year before. Yeah. But seeing as how we've learned that really there are two sides to the 2009 one for you. What did 2010 feel for you as a result?
2010, I hadn't done any good at Bass rounds earlier in the year, so I'd gone to the Nationals thinking, I'll be lucky to make the final. A few good heats, and did qualify for the final. And I think I even got my nose to the front in the first run of it, but it was stopped. I think it was Paul Cusack and Barry Ormond had a coming together on turn 1. So then we went for the rerun and finished third. And to be honest, the last lap of that final, it could have been me, Lee Ormond, or Martin Gould who won it. I think it was Martin's first year in the Noble Saloon, and we crossed the last lap flag, come off that top corner down the back straight. I was hooked up on the back of Lee, and Lee was hooked up on the back of Martin, and we were all pinned to the floor. But it was like racing on glass that year. It was a very different track, very slippy. And I came away from there thinking, another great result, and I was happy with the third place. I mean, it'd been great to have won it again, but I guess similar to the Bass there the year before, it was kind of okay, I can do it. I can run at the sharp end. I just wasn't doing it regularly enough. I don't think I made the Bass final in 2010. I think there was only that was the biggest final I made, which was the Nationals.
But no, it's pleased that you got some reflection from it, and eventually though, like, was it the same car you stuck with then, the Starlet, right up until replacing it? Had you done much to it over the years, or no? Was it sort of
the end of 2010? Obviously, we got told we could go to the live action arena at the Autosport show in January of 2011. So that was the first time I really invested in the car, let's say. So completely repaneled it, took a load of weight out of it, went to Olin shocks on the rear. Just changed a lot of stuff about it, really, with the help of Lee Ormond. And 2011 was the first time. I mean, I've been running Avo single adjustable shocks on the back of it up until then. And that was when we put Olin's on the back of it and started to perhaps try a bit harder. And then it was probably 2012 was the biggest step, because that was when I started to have some development by Paul Exon on the engine. So we did some cam stuff just before Star Bass, the one that was a very wet Friday. Did some engine development just before that and won 3 heats. And I'd already committed. We didn't run finals because of the weather; it was going to turn again. But I'd already committed to the C2 at that point, and there was quite a few people saying you're a fool. You should stay with the Starlet, because she was proper quick, and it was one of the fastest Class 3s at Star. I mean, Star was my own track, so I'd got a bit of an advantage there, I suppose. But it was super quick. Paul had found some serious torque and power at that point. Then we were into the C2 for 2013, and it was in the Autosport show as well.
I wasn't surprised that you was ready for a change of car. Obviously, we was getting more and more into space frame in the Class 3s and that. But I want to know why a C2 above all, because at the time I think only 1 or 2 had been used at all. Well, in Class 3, I think the only one which was around at that time was Tanger's. So why a C2 compared to anything else which was a possibility? And what was it like compared to the Starlet then? Obviously, it was basically like a new class, really, wasn't it? With how the cars could be. I mean, the Starlets were pretty much like any car back in the 90s. You could strip all the interior out, but it was still the car itself. I mean, things had progressed massively, hadn't they? Yeah. So the Starlets were quite a heavy thing, and this was a new evolution of the class. But I wanted to know why the Citroen C2 route over anything else that you could have had when they wasn't really being used.
So towards the end of my directorship, I suppose, with NASA, I was trying to get the scrutineers to perhaps rethink a little bit about how Class 3 was going to be. The Class 3 rulebook, as far as I know, even till today, is really built around not a national hot rod, but hot rods back in the day, Starlets. The rulebook is written to a Starlet, really. And I was trying to say to people, well, look, Starlets are getting rotten. It's going to become safety problem if we're not careful, because people aren't putting floors and repairing rot in the floors. You know, cages could collapse. There's all kinds of things that could go horribly wrong. And I was trying to suggest that maybe rather than outlawing 90% of the Class 3 field and doing away with Starlets, was that we kind of brought modern cars by adjusting where the rear axle was forward to bring them into contention. So suddenly you'd be able to go and buy panels from a scrapyard again. You'd be able to go and buy body shells from a scrapyard, and it could perhaps move the class on. And I think they've done something similar with Pat Smith's running a new Fiesta, which I think has got a rotated rear axle. But at the time, the people just couldn't see it. They couldn't understand it. They weren't close enough to it, I suppose. So I nearly made a point by going and buying a DAF 33. I actually bought one, an old DAF 33, which was an original rear wheel drive car, but a wheelbase that was super, super short. I bought it. I drove all the way to the New Forest. I bought it, and I thought it was an ugly looking thing in a real brown, horrible looking colour. And I thought, I just don't know whether I could race something like this. A smaller version of what the guy from Forest of Dean, can't remember his name. Shane
Manley.
Shane Manley. It was like a smaller version of what he ended up racing. And I just thought, I can't do it. So the C2 in terms of wheelbase was quite close to the Starlet. It was only a half-inch difference, I think, in wheelbase. And it was something different. And I basically got sold the idea that the C2 might look all right. It'd be different, and we could perhaps make it work. So that was.
I thought it was a stunning project when it was finished. I mean, I remember seeing it at the show, and it sort of, you couldn't really picture something like that until you saw the finished project. And because you look at, I think this is the way we've got to look at now. The problem is with cars being built for the road nowadays, there are no real small cars anymore. And Autographs, we don't want big cars because, I mean, it was fine years ago, and like when Class 3 and even Class 2 in the rear wheel drive age, when like Class 3 had to be a rear wheel drive shell, didn't it?
Yeah.
Effectively. So that's why the Ford Escorts and the Mark 1 Starlet worked. But then manufacturers stopped building rear wheel drive cars, but unless they were high performance cars or saloon cars like that. And so something had to change.
Yeah. And
I suppose, in a way, a fair respect for putting your neck out there to try and make a change for the better. Now, for some reason, though, we seem to have gone back in time with Class 3 again, haven't we? Because there seems to be more older versions of cars out there.
Classic hot rods.
yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love hot rod type stuff, but when Autograss was really fashionable for the Toyota Starlet, they'd already been around in the hot rods for 15 years.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're never going to follow that trend now with hot rods going like Vauxhall Tigras and like that, because they're actually using little coupe type stuff, which isn't allowed in racing. But what do you think from an outside point of view now with them using these Ford 100Es or whatever they are, or Austin A35s? Are you a fan of that, or would you like to see Class 3 try and go a bit more modern? We don't want to upset anybody, but what do you reckon?
I think that the cars that have been produced, there's some really nice cars out there. I think the workmanship that goes into them is great. I wonder sometimes if it's off-putting for the younger generation to join the class, because the 16, 17, 18-year-olds of today probably won't relate to a 100E like you and I do, or like parents do. And I know the older generation rave about them. They love to see it. They love to see an old car turn up in Class 3. I've thought about it myself. Mark II Escort, Mark 1 Escort. Could you make it work on a space frame? A Ford Anglia. Could you make it work on a space frame? You could. I genuinely believe that you could, with some time and effort put into it. But Is it the right thing for the class? I think there's a place for it. Classic hot rods are as popular as ever. You know, I quipped about that before, but I think there is a place for it. And I'm not really into outlawing any particular car in the class.
Yeah.
But for me, I think you've got to have also cars that are relatable, that could attract the new generation, because Class 3 doesn't attract young drivers. You know, I think back, I was one of the youngest when I started. Maybe Paul Cusack as well, Barry Ormond are all similar ages. But Andrew Empson is probably one of the youngest I've seen come through in recent years. And I think Charlie Thompson is talking about possibly inheriting his dad's car, which I think is great news.
Yeah.
For me, I'm all for the youth of today. Oh, Leon Dorset's boy James, I think, is also coming through, which is nice to hear. Interestingly, both in slightly more modern cars, but I'd like to see, you know, the reason we see these old cars is because of the way the rule book's written. So I can't remember now if 100E is slightly shorter than a Starlet, but you know, your wheelbase is free on an original rear wheel drive car. That's how the rule book reads. Yeah. Whereas if you choose a front wheel drive shell, it's got to stay pretty much at manufacturer's you know, wheelbase, and that's a problem, because as the years have gone on, the manufacturers make the wheelbases longer and longer. A Ford KA is considerably longer than a Starlet, and there's with it being rear wheel drive, with the engine being in the front, with that balance issue that comes with a Class 3, people just think I need to stay near that wheelbase minimum limit. So then straight away you're into C2s. Even a 106 is considerably longer than a C2 in wheelbase. So people don't use them. People have tried them. They haven't worked.
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, I know we had the wheelbase issue a few years ago, but as a kid, one of my favourite looking body shells in Class 3 was what Tippo used, the Toyota 1000.
Yeah,
I love the look of those, and what Pete Robinson used for many years. And I know we did have an issue. There was a problem with that, because as they tried to evolve the wheelbase rule. But this is the difficult thing, which obviously the directors have got when they come up with these rules, is yes, we need to look at continually progressing, but we can't destroy what we've already got.
Exactly. Although there hasn't in the past, in my experience of being at that level, there are people who would quite happily outlaw a lot of the class overnight to make a change. And I don't believe that's the right way of going about it. You're going to upset the membership. You need to do it in a more progressive way and controlled way, and allow people to keep racing. You know, if people want to carry on racing the old cars, let them race, but let's bring the modern stuff in line with that and make people perhaps want to race modern stuff because it's competitive as well. Yeah. And we're not, well, I personally don't think we're there just at the moment.
No. I mean, autograss is a sport where it's supposed to be entry level, but yes, competitive at the top end. But we've got to make it so that whatever class you want to go in, if you need something, it's easily accessible.
Yeah.
And this is where, in fairness, I think Class 5 and 7 is now sort of stuck, because while you can buy a mini pickup panel kit, the class is not going to change.
No.
And in a way, that could end up being how other space frame classes could be, because if you can then eventually allow, and people will start producing stuff as a panel kit. I mean, why couldn't you buy a Nissan Micra panel kit for a Class 6? Why couldn't you have a whatever panel kit for a Class 3? Eventually, I think it will get there, and in fact, in the long run, it'll end up being slightly better cost efficient, because you try and find now, like even in Class 2 terms, we've got a Vauxhall Nova sat out there. You try and find a decent Nova shell to use to race, you can't.
No.
And that's how it's going to go. But anyway, we don't want to get into this difficult bit. Although I did want to mention the comment about when you said you are respective and appreciative that people do want to use these older shells. But do you really want to be stood there and then you get a tug on your shirt saying, Daddy, what's that going round? Well, that's a car your granddad used to drive.
Yeah, it's right. And as I said, the younger generation just don't relate to it. I know I look at these 100Es and think, they're a beautiful piece of kit. They look the part. They're space framed. They are modern underneath. It's only a body shell on the top. But you're quite right. A 10-year-old, 15-year-old would look at it and go, that looks weird. I think we've got to have relatable body shells in the class to attract the slightly younger people to it, I suppose.
Yeah, I think we will get there, but you just have to keep an eye on what manufacturers produce as well. Because as I say, you take now the Ford Fiesta. I mean, the Mark 1 version was tiny when we look at it, but now that we're on like a Mark 7, it's massive as a car. So we've got to keep an eye on it, and unfortunately things get tricky when now more lighter weight material is used and plastic is more used rather than metal and that. But yeah, we're not going to go into all that. But anyway, what I want to know is, when you first got to race the C2, how did that feel compared to the Starlet?
Poles apart. I remember it was we'd had trouble with weather at the beginning of the year 2013, so my first race was a qualifier in the Shropshire.
What is it with weather at the beginning of your years?
Oh, it's terrible. It's just Shropshire, I think, as you've seen from Bass rounds in the past.
Yeah.
But yeah, the first meeting, and it was a qualifier. There was me, Andy Pipe, Martin Gould, Bob Matthews, and you're straight into it, and you're thinking, well, if we can keep up with these boys, we're somewhere close. And I think I left that meeting with a second in my first race, second to Andy. I won my second heat, and my third heat, I think I was third. And that was a good day run. Shropshire qualifier, that was a good day run. And
apologies, I forgot to mention Andy Pipe in the list of top names earlier on.
It was good. The car felt all right. I wasn't comfortable in the seats. I felt too low. The car didn't feel... Well, it was just all very different. I was running a different gearbox. I was running the Elite Formula One gearbox that they had, 2-speed. So I was learning a lot of things at that time. Steering was power steering on a Beresford rack. I'd never run a 1-to-1 rack before, so that was taking some getting used to. But I felt like we were in a place where we could definitely move it forward, and to take those results away from its first outing, because I was supposed to come to you, actually, wasn't I, at Scunthorpe with it?
Yeah.
But we weren't finished, and it was all right. Yeah, it was all right. It was very, very different to the Starlet in everything really about it. It was just the way it felt, the sound, the vibrations, it was just all weird. The handling of it, the turning in. I suddenly found that I'd got so much more lock. You could run a lot more opposite lock. When you just spun out in the Starlet, you were actually still going forward in the C2. So the space frame cars are very different. Even though this was on struts as well on the front end, it wasn't on double wishbone. So I hadn't gone down that route because I wasn't comfortable with it. I didn't know enough about it, so I stuck with the tried and tested struts on the front. And but it was still very different, but good. It felt quick.
Did you feel you had to change your driving style at all to suit the car then? Did you have to be more sort of committed into the corners? Could you get on the power as early out of the bends?
Yeah.
I think it was a whole different world, really.
You had to be more aggressive, a lot more aggressive, which was uncomfortable for me to begin with, because I've never been a full sideways driver. I've never been the Carl Mosley of Class 3, for instance. I've always felt that I'm a bit tidier than that. I've never felt comfortable having the tail out and giving it everything. But that's how you have to drive these space frame cars generally.
I suppose that obviously your previous way, that sort of followed from your Class 4 days, where precision is pretty important, isn't it? I mean, yes, on a wet track in a Class 4, you could sort of slide it into a corner and use the power to pull yourself out. But in a rear-wheel drive, and front all the way to the front, you do that, you understeer even faster.
Yeah.
So I thought it was 2014 that you brought the C2 out. I didn't realise it was 2013. So apologies on the slacking of being up to date with you. But I wanted to skim along to 2014, and obviously now we know you'd had a year with the car. Going into the 2014 Nationals, then how sort of confident was you in yourself and in the car at that point?
2014 was a difficult year for me from a work point of view.
Again.
I'd had a big project in London. I'd basically lived in London for May, June and July, and it meant I missed the Stroud Bass that was just before the men's nationals. I'd come up to you guys for the first Bass, just missed out on the final because I got smashed up in the third heat. I'd had good enough heats on the Saturday to make that final. I'd gone to Cumdee and made the final, took some good points, and then work just took over really in amongst all that. So I went to the Nationals thinking I've missed a Bass. The last time I raced it was in June. My head's been completely fried with work. I wasn't perhaps thinking straight, and I thought, well, you know, it's not ideal, but work pays the bills. This doesn't pay the bills. So, yeah, it was a bit worrying. I knew the car was quick. Sally had proven the car was quick. She'd raced Stroud Bass, even though I wasn't there, and she'd done well in the heats. I managed to get there for the Sunday, but I knew it was there or thereabouts. She was having some good racing with Becky Shaw, Penny Smith, cars that I knew were quick anyway. So, yeah. In some ways, I felt perhaps relaxed about it because I wasn't putting myself under pressure. I just didn't think it was going to happen. First heat, I managed to get a second place, I think, because Andrew Empson was green flagged perhaps for cones, or somebody was green flagged in front of me. It wasn't great because it was a virgin field, so it was grass, and as you said, everybody's all over the place.
Yeah.
Second heat, put a new set of tyres on. I changed my gearing for the second heat with the tyres and won it. And I thought, first and a second on a Saturday at a men's nationals, that's quite a nice place to be.
Yeah.
So then I was starting to feel a bit, well, we're going to be in the final. I just need to finish on the Sunday, and we'll be there. So Sunday come along, Barry won it. He needed the win because he'd had a black flag for a jump start in the second heat. Me and Pete Haynes had a good little race together, and I finished second in the end there. So winning 2 seconds, and we're in the final. And I was really relaxed. That's the most relaxed I've been before a final in all the national finals I've raced in. And you were the last man I saw because.
Well, yeah. We're going to mention this at some point, but again. Your knowledge of what I do seems to be better than what I know.
Good memory.
Yeah, well, this was a bit of an odd one because at the time we was trying to do interviews, which bizarrely is where we are now. But they said, well, what we want to do is we want to send somebody down to the holding lanes to try and do some interviews with the finalists. And I'm thinking, well, I'm not sure how many people are going to want to talk to me, seeing as how they're gearing themselves up for the biggest race of the year. But I'll give it a go. And then we got down there, and I didn't have a headset, so I didn't know if anybody was talking on the commentary compared to me down here. So we sort of overlapped each other anyway. And then some drivers had helmets on, so you couldn't hear what they were saying anyway. And I didn't really, well, I knew that I'd spoken to you, but I didn't know that the last conversation you had before the race was between me and you. And then even more after the race, I didn't know that I spoke to you. I can't even remember speaking to you again after for some reason, but it seems to be that I was the first person.
It's on West Country Videos if you watch it, Russ.
Right. I will have to watch it back. But so you went into this sort of like a completely different mindset compared to 09.
Yeah, very different. And just thinking back, one detail I forgot there was just before I was called to the final, the scrutineers came to me, and a running theme with that C2 was people complaining that it was illegal, that it was wrong. Right. And often it was engine location. if I got checked once, I got checked 10 times for the engine location in that car. And the reason for it was, if you stood at the side of the start line and looked through the arches, you could see where the engine was. And people felt that it was too far back, and there is a rule about that in Class 3. So Dave George and guy from Leewood, I can't remember his name now, came to me just before they were calling the finals up, and they said, we've had a complaint, we need to check the car. And I said, fair enough. Took the bonnet off, threw the bonnet on the grass. I said, you've been here before, still the same car, you passed it through scrutineering, you checked it in scrutineering, and if you think I've moved the engine between scrutineering and now, well, you know, you go for it, it's all yours. And they checked it, and Dave said to me, he said, I know it's not wrong, but I've got to check it because we've been asked to check it. So they did check it, it was all fine, put the bonnet back on. And that was then when I drove up and got out of the car, because I think I was second qualifier to Sam Gould that weekend. So I got second choice of the grid, and they were watering the track at the time. So, and then I walked up to the start line looking at what grid to pick, and you appeared with a microphone and said, oh, just give us a few words. It was all about Sam, and you were saying, you know, obviously he's top qualifier, he's looked quick all weekend. Do you think you can beat him? And I remember this like it was yesterday, because I looked up the track, I saw the water, and I thought, well, that car can gate, but when it's wet, we're all in the same boat. You know, it doesn't matter how good it is, it ain't perhaps going to be the first one to the corner. And I said to you, if I'm with him to the corner, we've got a chance. We've all got a chance. Whoever's there together with him, we've got a chance. And that's pretty much what happened. So it was the bottom corner that cost it him. But
well, I couldn't remember what words I said, but I also didn't know that you'd had that last minute annoyance before you gone up there. Now, are you sure that your shell doesn't have separate bolts so you can slide it along to make it look like it's different?
No, it was just always a problem for some reason.
I think Lee himself sort of had the issue when he first brought out the style that he built for himself. So again, it was one of them where people didn't like or appreciate any change or anything different, and they find a means of finding it wrong. So
it's also a misunderstanding of that rule, but I'm not going to tell you about that now.
No. We'll not get into any political mess. So after then, I'd sort of delayed your focus from it by sticking a microphone in your face and saying,
not at all.
Saying, all the buzz is on this other lad who has taken over his dad's car and looks to be the favourite for it, and you're actually then instead sort of bypassing me and looking up the hill, because it was an uphill track, and seeing the conditions. And I suppose in a way that reflected on your grid choice. You picked an outside grid. I can't remember if it was 7 or 8.
7, yeah.
So 7 this time. So grid 8 and grid 7. So there's a bit of an omen for you having the outside grids. But in fairness, this time because of the conditions, it wasn't quite the best start, because you had to get through, I think, quite a bit of loose to sort of get up there, because obviously it had all been thrown out before. But in all fairness, I think that is probably the wettest dry national final I think I've seen, apart from Class 1. Because it was dry before then. It didn't rain. It was a sunny day, but they didn't half water it. So, I think watching it back, you was only about 5th to the first corner.
Yeah.
So sort of, what was your mindset then after the first corner? Sort of, well, I suppose you probably didn't really know whereabouts you was, because you got filled in quite early. And then it was a very calculated drive, and I think this is where all your years of experience racing in this going right back to Class 4, I think, and this is where I think I've tied it in with when you sort of raced at like the Nottingham Winter Series, racing in mixed conditions and learning the conditions and how to get the best out of the car in it.
Yeah.
Because you made sure that you had that car everywhere you needed it to be. And it's not, no disrespect, but it's not as if you put anybody under pressure. You sort of made sure you were in the right place so that if anything opened up, you were there to take it. and you had to pass people because, as I say, you was about fifth to the first corner. So what was your mindset about how you were going to go about that race after turn one? Obviously, you was happy that you got round it at first, and then go from there. So what were the thoughts?
I found it a bit weird that I'd gated as well as I had, and then it seemed like all 8 of us had pretty much gated identical. Sam was slightly ahead as we got to the corner, but there was nothing in it. And Pete Robinson did his massive move into the first corner where he was basically pinned to the floor, and I think he come from grid 2 across the front of everybody, and I think it was him who filled me in at the time.
Yeah.
And we come off that corner, coming down the bank. I don't know, must have been 5th still, I suppose, as we come down the bank. And then I pushed on like Sam. If you watch the video, me and Sam do exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
The only difference is I dipped the clutch and mine turned where his didn't. And as we come out of that corner, Jed power spun on the inside. And suddenly I'm looking up ahead and I can only see Pete Robinson, Anthony Herbert, and there's me. And I thought, wow, okay. But I thought, I know Jed's round. I don't know whether that's going to be stoppage or whatever. But I hadn't managed to get to the inside in the first corner because of Pete and everybody else getting in the way as such. So I think it was that time I did come in to the corner to see. I knew it was wet. Obviously, we'd been round it once before, but I wanted to try a different line. And it hooked up on the inside. As it come down the bank again, dropped down the bank. I was more aggressive with it as we come into the bottom corner, and then I went out in the loose in the bottom corner where I had been in the first lap, and I seemed to make a bit more ground. And each lap after that, I made a bit more ground. I think I passed Anthony Herbert the lap after on the outside in the bottom corner, and I knew that's where it was. The engine I had then, it was very torquey. There was a lot of torque in it, and it was making the car grunt coming off that bottom corner and up the bank by putting the back wheels out in the loose. And if you watch the video, you can see I'm kicking the dust where I'm a long way from the cones, but he's kicking the dust off the back wheels. And I got up to second and I thought, there's no way I'm going to beat Pete. Pete's been racing a long time. I've raced Pete many times. And when the conditions are like that and Pete's switched on, he's untouchable. If I finish second to him, fair play to him, because I knew he hadn't won it before. Not that perhaps I was thinking about that at the time, but I thought, I don't feel there's any way I'm going to catch him. And then a lap later, I'm a bit closer. And at this point, I've used most of my roll-offs because it's that wet. And everybody tells me how mine was the dirtiest car out of all of them in that final. Nobody could see any colour in the car. It was just covered in mud. And then we come round the top corner, me and Pete, and as I come off the top corner, I was on the throttle too early, I felt at the time, and the car went away from me. It was going out towards the fence, and I thought, I'm going to hit the fence. And again, if you watch Tony's video of it, you see it kick a puff of dust just as it gets to the Armco, and that drive put me down into the bottom corner, and I carried that much pace. I was able to pass Pete as we come off that corner and back up the bank. And as I passed him, the roll-offs run out. I pulled them and they jammed. There was just the clean strip I'd got. And I remember thinking to myself, if he comes back past me, I've got to take my goggles off. I've got nothing left. I'm not going to be able to see. And I never saw him again. I just stayed on the inside on the top corner, outside on the bottom corner for the last 2 laps, and I didn't see him again. And we pulled into the scrutineering bay. In fact, Nick Shaw was the first person I saw as I come off. It's weird how you remember all this detail, but I went round to the Star Club on the track, and they were being very supportive, making a lot of noise. I wanted to see Sal, really. I knew she was at the fence. Drove off the track. Nick Shaw, Becky Shaw were the first people I saw, and Nick grabbed hold of me and said that was a cracking race, well done. Yeah. And I drove round into the scrutineering area. Pete had got out of his car, and Pete come to me and he went, "You've won it before. Why couldn't you have let me win it?" And we had a bit of a laugh about that. But yeah, and then the next thing, we were on the truck, and you're the next person I see.
Yeah, well, like I say, I didn't remember that bit happening, but it was definitely a hard race. Not. I mean, the racing was hard, but it was the conditions. I couldn't believe it when that's how it laid out.
Yeah,
And in fairness, you would normally think if you're in the mid pack after lap one, you're going to struggle to progress from it, really. But in the end, it came through, and after an amazing drive, which, in no disrespect, you probably wouldn't have expected. I mean, you wasn't the favourite to win in 2009, and you wasn't the favourite to win in 2014. But personally, how did this one feel? Because learning about 2009, it's not the reaction I expected. Does this one feel a greater satisfaction?
yeah, definitely. I felt I earned it. I drove for it. I learned the track. I learned the conditions we were in that final. I found the line. You know, if Pete did something wrong, it was because he stuck to the inside on that bottom corner for nearly every lap, apart from the last one. After I'd passed him, that was the only mistake he made. But Pete hadn't tried the outside at the same time because he'd had a different race to me and he'd stuck to the inside all that time. I'd gone out there because I had no choice. So yeah, I did come away from that thinking that was for me. That was it. I'd achieved what I'd always wanted to achieve, and I'd done it in a way that I was proud of for myself, really. Yeah, and that was. I'd had a tough time with that C2 up until then. 2013 hadn't been a good year. I didn't make the nationals. I blew the diff out of it. I had a load of problems with it. Just couldn't get it right, and I cut the front end off it in that winter and did it myself for 2014, and then went and won the nationals. So the combination of all that, plus having had such a challenging year at work, it was like relief. And yeah, just I felt I deserved it based on that race.
Yeah, well, no, quite rightly so. As I say, it's a race which you wouldn't have expected it to have been on the type of playing field it was, and the way it panned out, I don't think it could have gone much better. And I think obviously the problem on conditions like that, and that's where Pete obviously fell foul, is because he's in front. Why shouldn't he just stick to the inside line? Because you would, if you're in front, that's obviously the fastest route round the inside. So everybody else is the one behind with nothing to lose, and you obviously found that way best, and it worked out. And yeah, the credit to you because it worked out in your favour. And I am happy that Pete did eventually get a national win.
Yeah,
because he's deserved it after his years of trying.
I texted him straight after he won it, and I said, "Well done, Pete. You know, I'm glad it happened for you at last, because I do feel he deserved it. Pete's a fast driver. He's been in the pen for a long time in 3, and if you think back over the years, I think he is one of the deserved ones of a title, to be honest."
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm not sure when this all happened, but really from the nationals, you were starting to wind down a bit of your autograss career, because you would actually leave racing in the sport and go on to new ventures. I think it was 2015 it actually kicked off, unless you'd had an interest in it beforehand. But actually, where did this interest of doing something different come in, and why did you go into this new world? And just explain a bit of what it actually is that you did. And this is obviously with the pickup truck racing.
Yeah, I suppose, you know, away from racing in grassing, I've been involved at many different levels, from league chairman, club chairman, NASA director for 3 years. I've seen some bad sides to the sport, unfortunately. People are passionate, but there's a line between passion and being downright nasty. And that had tainted me. My 2008 to 2010, I think it was, years as a NASA director. I think it was the last year. My last year was when you guys had the ladies' nationals at Scunthorpe.
Yeah.
And, I got dragged into a situation there that I really wasn't happy about, and that's the first time, really, in my autograss career, I've lost my temper. I don't lose my temper very often. I'm just not that geared up for it.
Yeah.
But, at Scunny that weekend, I remember your dad trying to calm me down as I come off the track. I'd been marshalling, I was being dragged into something I didn't particularly feel it was my remit to sort out. But I remember your dad, like, he got his arm around me and he was saying, just calm down before you go in and say anything. Calm down. It's not going to do any good if you go in there with the red mist. And he was right, but that was the end of it for me. I got involved in too many things, and I just didn't want it. I didn't want it, and that did taint it from a racing point of view. I suppose what happened in 2009 had a little bit to do with that. The comments I had afterwards as well, and come 2014, we'd had a new car. I'd had a lot of problems with the car, and I'd had enough. I just said, I've done it twice, which is fantastic. It's a great result. It's a great achievement. I want to do something different. I'm at a stage of life where I've spent 20 years on the grass, 20 years racing, and I just want to do something else. I've been watching pickups for a while from a distance. I've been to a couple of meetings. Paul Exon was heavily involved in pickups by this point. I'd had chats with him, and I decided to put the race car up for sale. The Class 3 went up for sale, and Rich Lee showed some interest, and Rich and I did a deal. And I rung Sonny Howard and I said, what's for sale, Sonny? What have you got in terms of a pickup? I fancy having a challenge. And he said, I'll give you some tickets to Brands Hatch. Come to the last meeting of the year. There's going to be one there that's being driven, that's for sale, and come and see what you think. So we went to Brands Hatch for the bonfire meeting, which is the big trucks, and made to feel very welcome. Got introduced to some of the drivers, saw the car, and did the deal. And I remember feeling, stood there watching them on pit lane, lining up ready to go out at Brands. It was raining, the trucks had been out, so it was a bit slippy, the big trucks. And they were like, they're like a NASCAR. That was what it was themed on, a space frame chassis with a pickup truck body, fiberglass body on top. With a very similar layout. Still had like an Atlas axle, still had Vauxhall 16 valve engine in the front, so it was like a Class 3, but it was circuit racing. Yeah,
so it had something you could relate to still from a mechanical point of view.
Yeah.
Had you decided this before the 2014 Nationals to look at something else, or had it happened a little bit after? And sort of, autograss is obviously a family sport, and we will mention Sally now, who we will also mention a two-time national champion in her own right, and many successes apart. How did she feel about this decision? Because obviously autograss is a family sport where you can both race.
Yeah.
And now this is something, obviously, your personal decision to go ahead. Was she fully supportive of it?
Yes, we'd made a life choice at that time. I think it was just before the Ladies Nationals, so we decided that we were going to adopt to create a family. So 2015, 14 was marked as Sally's last year racing, as we were going to do that, and obviously be busy with other things, and seeing as Sal was going to have that time off, we agreed that I'd go and try something different, something I'd always wanted to do, really, since they'd started. So that's what happened. So I went and bought that pickup truck, brought it home. Me and my dad stripped it all, had a week off work, stripped it, powder coated it, painted it, got it ready for the beginning of 2015, which was at Brands Hatch again, and scored a relatively big sponsor at that time as well, Wild West Beef Jerky.
Yeah.
Came on board from the beginning, which was fantastic. I mean, that only happened 2 days before it was due for stickers with Stu. So Stu had to completely change the design very quickly before I got up there. But it looked great, developed a great relationship with the brand, and went to Brands Hatch. I was ill, and I remember being lapped at Brands Hatch and thinking, "Wow, I'm properly out of my depth here. This is different world. These boys were putting in laps that were like 10, 12 seconds faster than what I was doing at the beginning. And there was some big names, you know, Dave Longhurst was involved.
Oh yeah.
Mark Willis, Michael Smith, Paul Tompkins, world banger champion. You know, some real good guys as well, characters. Barry
the big
Lee,
names from oval racing.
Yeah, that was kind of where people went from hot rodding if they wanted to do something different. Yeah.
So yeah, you had a bit of an eye opener from it, but you weren't going to give up. What we're going to say though is what's obviously, well, for you, with being heavily business orientated, your autographs preparation side of things, you thankfully was able to leave to your dad, and he did help you out in a big way. But what was it like prepping wise for an event in the trucks? Was it much different, or did you have to really commit more to try and make it
you
work?
do have to commit more. I mean, you're doing more miles. You know, at a weekend, I'd perhaps get an hour in the seat, and that was an hour proper driving. That wasn't an hour sat in the paddock waiting to go out. That was an hour on track. So 40 minutes to an hour. You're doing more miles. You know, you've got to keep an eye on bearings, brake pads. The brakes are running a lot hotter, brake fluid. You've got to be all over them really, because they are, with it being circuit racing, you're on tarmac. Everything's got to be more precise. I mean, with grassing, it's no disrespect to it, it's a little bit more forgiving because the conditions are so changeable. So it doesn't matter how accurate your corner weighting is, it's going to change as you race on the grass anyway. You want it somewhere close, obviously, but you know, conditions change, track surface changes, is watered in front of you. There's lots of different conditions. Whereas on a circuit, don't really get that. You know, if you go into a corner 50 times and it's dry, it's pretty much going to be the same 50 times over on tarmac, unless somebody spills oil or something. So it was more intense. And towards the end, the last year and a half, I actually started working with Dave Longhurst in terms of setup and that side of it. So we'd maintain the mechanical side of it, and Dave would then have it as soon as I got to the circuit, and he'd just make sure that it was all spot on. And it was great working with Dave. He's a lovely guy, one of the nicest I've ever met in motorsport, to be honest. And he taught me quite a bit, you know, just him helping and assisting and giving advice. It's amazing what you pick up. Yeah,
well, Longan is a massive, he's a legendary name in autograph, or oval racing, should I say, and circuit racing now as well. So you definitely got yourself in some good company. What about physically, mentally yourself then? Obviously, you're having to do these races, which stretch on a lot longer than what an autograss race is, which is only 3-4 minutes tops. This, you're now going out for hours. How did you feel in yourself? Did you feel like you actually had to do more like personal preparation to compete in this?
I guess physically not so much, but you did know about it. If you'd spent half an hour in the car and you were racing it hard, particularly if it was warm in the middle of summer, you'd be a state. You'd lose weight over a weekend because of the loss of water, if you like. But mentally, the most demanding was Rockingham, and I'm extremely proud to be able to say that I've raced there, because we were doing 130 mile an hour average lap speeds around Rockingham. And when you're stuck in a draft, a line of pickups doing that kind of speed with a concrete wall just meters away to your right hand side, you know, it's phenomenal. I've never experienced anything like it in my life. The G-force, that tucking in behind somebody and suddenly finding that your truck's got another 1500 RPM at the top end, and you were just against the air. The effect of side drafting, just unreal. I just can't explain it until you've been in it. You probably wouldn't understand it really, but and the mental part of that was that concrete wall, was the safety aspect of it. The one day Mark Willis got it wrong out of turn 4, and he crossed the finish line backwards at 127 mile an hour on the transponder and hit the wall on the inside of the track. And we were under caution for 4 or 5 laps, and he was lay on the grass with paramedics around him. And until you've passed that and seen it and realised the damage that could be done, yeah, that's a different, it's a different game completely, really. But the adrenaline rush, you know, even in the rain, we used to lap at like 90 to 100 mile an hour average. And the speed and the precision, and coming down pit road and thinking that you're doing 30 mile an hour, which was the speed limit, and you're actually doing 60 or 70 because you've spent 20 minutes doing 140, and your brain's adjusted to a different like speed. It was awesome. It's a real shame that they lost it, you know, because the pickups were the only formula to run that oval.
Yeah, and I know they tried big things, obviously attracting America and all that, and there was some big buzz about it originally. Autographs was meant to go there, wasn't it? The Nationals was meant to be there for about 5 years or something. Ridiculous in the early 2000s. You would have some success in Pro 2 category, I believe it was. You'd actually be champion in 2015, your first full year, so that can't be bad.
No, we did move forward as the year went on. There was a couple of us in Pro 2, and I learned a lot. It was very different by the end of the year. You know, I was starting to get my head around tarmac racing and racing with the pack. It's also very professional. We're one of the only formulas, or we were one of the only formulas that you could have a radio. So I had a spotter. I remember when I first went to watch them, there was like 10 people to a team. I remember thinking, crikey, used to turn up at Grassy and just me and the wife, you know, and suddenly you've got all these people. You've got a spotter in the stands, or your spotter had to go and stand somewhere. I could talk to him, he could talk to me. The crew chief, you had to have a nominated crew chief. They were on the radio. They could listen, but they couldn't talk to anybody as such. You know, and then there comes pit stops, changing tyres in qualifying, trying to put in decent lap times. Paul Exon was very helpful. And the way that Sonny organised that whole formula was very, very professional. And it's very well respected on the circuits as being one of the best in terms of the way that they get you all together, you know, the way we use garages. It was a theatre. Sonny always used to say that, you know, the track's the theatre and you're here to put on a performance. You know, it's not, he used to say it's not all about winning, but it obviously was all about winning. You know, and even using radio whilst you're racing is something that takes a bit of getting used to, and you have to have a bit of trust in your spotter. I mean, I have Simon, who's been a good friend of mine since primary school, and even he had to learn when to talk to me on the radio. You know, if you're going in the hairpin at Brands Hatch and you're battling with another car, you don't want him coming on shouting in my ear about what's going on. He needs to think about when he starts to talk to you on the radio.
And when to give you the information. The right
lap times, who's doing what, if you were in qualifying. And 2015, we took the Pro 2 Championship. Remember, we had, I've got the sign in my workshop now, but the stage at the presentation was all my pickup. It was because I've got a big brand sponsor as well, and the guy who run that was actually there to present trophies, and it was a really nice experience, and they do make you feel very welcome, and it's very different, I think, to other circuit racing in terms of there's a little bit, because it's that short oval type stuff. They were all very willing to help. They'd lend you engines, gearboxes, axles, wheels. You know, if you needed it, somebody would generally be there to help you out, which was really nice, because I'd been told before I went there, circuit racing, nobody wants to know you. You're on your own. If you break down, you know, you've got no chance of help. But actually in pickups, it was very different to that, very different.
Oh, well, that's good. Well, anyway, one question. Did your spotter mate, did he ever try and put an American accent when you was on the oval?
He did. He used to talk to me about the grid girls that were about. He used to say, "Don't come in now because I'm eating ice cream," and all that kind of stuff.
Days of Thunder reference.
Hit the pace car, it was all that kind of thing.
Oh no, I'm pleased that you you went and found something that you would enjoy. And it is great to learn these new experiences, isn't it? Because again, there's nothing wrong with enjoying autographs for what it is. I will stick with autographs for the rest of my days, because that's what I grew up with and that's what I enjoy. But I have no disrespect to anybody who sets out and achieves new challenges, takes them on, and does whatever they enjoy. And I think I'm really pleased that you went out and did something. And it sounds like it's not something you're ever going to regret because of the experiences you had. But eventually, as autographs does, it drags you back in gradually. You have been back a part of it. You're not taking it as serious as what you had done before. You ended up with another class 3 back in the class, and you've done the odd meeting here and there, the odd baz round here and there. Is it just on a socially type thing now and enjoying a weekend doing something?
That was to try and develop a car. It wasn't actually mine. It was one that somebody else had bought and asked me to up for them and race it. So yeah, that's why I ended up at North Wales Bass with it in the end of 2019. And at that time, the guy who bought it actually wanted to sell it on. So I said, well, I'll take it to North Wales Bass. We'll race it and see what we can do. And for a car that perhaps hadn't been competitive when I raced it before, I did manage to make a difference. And that was, again, a confidence boost. I hadn't set up a lot of people's cars at that point. But just applying some of the knowledge I'd learned from pickups, some of the stuff I'd learned from Dave, suddenly I got a car that was half thereabout. And if I'd have spent another couple of meetings just improving it slightly more, it would have been just about perhaps a big final maker, I guess, if I'd have put the effort into it. But I didn't buy it. I didn't want it. I wasn't in a position to buy it at the time. And yeah, so somebody else came along and they bought it. And I think it's in Ireland now, actually, from messages I've received. But yeah, it was nice to be back in it. And I'd be a different driver, I think, having learned what I learned with pickups. I mean, them boys, they were hard races with them. Not dirty, not being bashed about, although being pushed over Paddock Hill at 90 mile an hour with another one rammed in your back bumper is a bit of an experience.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It was proper, tough, hard racing, and I learned so much. And I realised that perhaps I've been too respectful in my past in autographs. You know, that 2009 Severn Valley Bass final that we talked about earlier on, if you watch that back, there's an incident between me and Lee where I back off, and the same with Derek Lynch on the very last lap, which dropped me back to 4th. Yeah. And in hindsight, I probably should have kept the foot in, because all we'd have done is rattled doors all the way up the straight, but I'd have probably pulled past him. I didn't at that time, and there's perhaps a bit of confidence there, but I understand it better now, I think, is a better way of putting it. Having been elsewhere, done other things, I completely get it, and I think I would be a different driver.
Yeah. Well, no, I think it's fascinating to learn that you could actually take some aspects of car preparation from the pickup trucks and bring it back to autographs. And it's obviously made you a more knowledgeable person about it, and that's sort of helped you branch out to doing the little bits that you're now taking on with working on cars for other people. But what about yourself then going forward? Are you is there anything you would like to do? Because no car at the minute. Would you like to come back to the grass a bit more regularly, or is there something else on the circuits you'd like to try?
If money was no object, I'd go back to pickups tonight. I'd ring somebody and buy one tonight. And the actual purchasing of the truck is well, when I bought my first pickup truck after selling the Class 3, I had change left over from what I sold the Class 3 for. So the cost of them is not particularly excessive, probably cheaper than you buy a top end Class 3 now anyway. But it's the running costs. And my last year doing it, when I was running top 4 in the Pro 1 Championship, we were probably at £1,500 an event, and that was just to get there and race. By the tyre that you were allowed, that wasn't maintenance, that wasn't damage, that was just to go and race. So when you work that out over 11 meetings of a year, it's quite a lot. You don't have to spend that, but I think if you want to run at the sharp end, you do. So that was what prevented me from continuing in it, plus losing the sponsor as well, unfortunately. But in terms of grassing, never say never. I haven't got anything. There is rumours. I've heard people talking. I'm building a chassis in my workshop to race myself, and that isn't happening. But never say never. I don't regret leaving grassing. I don't think I would ever be stopped from going back to it, myself. I had some negative experiences because of the roles I was involved in at all levels. I probably wouldn't stop me coming back. I think it's a bit of a shame. It'd be nice to see perhaps younger people involved in some of these roles as well. But at the same time, I understand that their heads probably aren't into that either. Running a sport as big as autograss is a difficult one. But in terms of being a competitor, the thing I struggle with is I felt with the pickup I had a return on investment in terms of getting 40 minutes to an hour in the seat when you went. I felt like I was enjoying and getting something back from what I purchased. Grassing, I've become very aware that you're in it 2 to 3 minutes a weekend. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think it's good that you've got so much choice to watch. There's other things to do. There's a social side of it, which is fantastic. You won't get a motorsport like it.
No, definitely not.
Things. But as I say never. I may come back in the future. I don't know just at the minute.
If you was to come back in for the start of the upcoming season, which is looking to happen in the next month or so, if you had the choice of class, would class 3 be where you'd go back?
No other class that interests me, to be honest.
Really?
3 has always been the class that I've loved. It's always been the class that raises the hairs on the arms when I'm watching it. Even if I went this weekend and watched a grid of good, fast class 3s, that'd be what I want to watch. Don't get me wrong, 7s, 8s, 9s and 10s, they're spectacular to watch. There's some cracking drivers. And maybe if I got in one, perhaps I'd never raced a 7. Maybe I'd feel slightly differently about it. But 3 is where my heart has always been. I think it's a great class. I think I'd just like to see a bit more of the younger generation coming through, really.
Well, there's certainly some possibilities of it happening with 1 or 2 drivers, which we look forward to seeing happen. And I can completely agree. Class 3 is what I was born to watch, with my dad beginning with it, and it's been one of my favourites, and it still is now. I think it has gone through some difficult times as a class, but it's now in a fantastic place where the racing at top level is excellent all weekend long. So we look forward to seeing what it brings, and hopefully one day we'll get to see you back out there. So just on reflecting everything that you've done then, obviously national success has to be, especially 2014 after learning from what we spoke about tonight. But is that in autograss, is that your top moment, or is there anything else which you would say is your most rewarding personally, mate? It doesn't have to be about a trophy or a title. What is your most rewarding moment from your time racing?
I think the team ethic that we had at Star, so away from the racing, I don't think you'll top a nationals. I never won a Bass. If I'm honest, I was never particularly interested in winning a Bass. The Bass has never done it for me like the nationals. But as I said to you before, I think I'm a bit old school in terms of perhaps watching it through the 80s. I think the Bass has its place. I wouldn't turn a Bass title down. I can see why people race for it. It's just not something that has been a burning ambition of mine, really, over the years. Maybe if I come back, it would be something I'd strive to achieve because I've not done it before. But my years as chairman and joint chairman at Star, me, Pete Berry, Tom Law, Lee Everson, Brian Everson, the years that I was there and we had that team, the feel of the club, the way people mucked in, the jobs that were done, the meetings we held, the feedback we got from home drivers, from visiting drivers, that for me was like one of the best things, I would say, away from racing, because you feel appreciated. You put shift in, the venue was top notch, you know. I remember you guys, you and your dad coming, and Jamie, to that 1-2 day meeting where you come in the big silver lorry, and you know, I remember your dad talking to us about it, and the feedback that to come from your dad, that meant a lot, to be fair, because I always looked up to him as a club chairman as well, and what he did with Scunny and stuff, and as a bloke, he was a cracking guy. So to have that feedback, that for me meant a lot, because you're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for other people to enjoy, and for people to appreciate that, to turn up, enjoy a good day's racing and go home and say track was good, venue looks mint, we've had a great time, we felt very welcome. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I mean we went to the very first Middle of England, 2009. We pulled up there as just because it was a new meeting. We'd never been to Star ourselves, and it was fantastic. We went a couple of times and we thoroughly enjoyed it. I never got to go to the last Baz round that Star held because I had to work, but I remember Bex was there. She went for the weekend and said about like the Saturday was excellent. But she was on the phone to me Sunday morning. It was just like, it's raining. It's really bad. It's not good. And in the end, obviously, it did get cut off, didn't it? And it was a respectful decision because we know how trying and difficult it is when conditions don't go the way in autograss. And I think you've had a humbled time in the sport. You've achieved personally possibly more than what you believed you may have done. But you've gone out into and gone for different aspects within the sport and what it can bring. You've done your bit. You've deservedly earned and reached rewards and success from it. And you should feel pretty proud of yourself, if you like to use that word, of what you've done and achieved. And as I said, there should be no disrespect in anybody going out there and trying new things, and because at the end of the day, we did in autograss, and we do in autograss because we enjoy it. And if there's a time where it's the enjoyment and the spark isn't quite there, and you go and do something else to try and build that enjoyment, then so be it. And autograss isn't going to go away from you because you've had too many years at it. And I'm pretty sure, as we've discussed tonight, you've looked back on it, you've still got fond early memories, and you've got fond closer memories as well. So it's nice to look back on it, and I'm really pleased that you've shared some of them with us. I can't say better than that. As I say, we've not spoken for a good few years, and I now feel like we should have spoken before then, because I've really enjoyed learning more about you and speaking to you generally. I think it's been a really nice time talking to you, and I can't whatever you choose to do. I know obviously work is still highly prioritized, but family is there. You've got your outside objectives and enjoyments, and don't let any of it stop you. So
cheers, Russ, appreciate that.
No, I really do. I can't appreciate.
I've never sat down with anybody, and apart from Sal perhaps understands some of the things, but I don't think I've ever sat down and talked about my history, I suppose, or how I got involved in it, and my thoughts on things. And yeah, it's been good. It's been a bit of an eye opener, really, when I think back about some of these things and discuss them with you. So, thank you very much. Yeah.
No. As I said, I was very surprised when you messaged me and you says, "Oh, I'll do this," because you are a quiet guy compared to a lot of them out there, and
Yeah.
and with how we've spoken tonight, you think about what you say and what you do, and you are still fairly quiet with when you express it as well, and that's just the kind of guy you are, and I can't say anything bad about that at all. But to actually go out there and speak it, I fully appreciate it, and I've really enjoyed talking to you and learning about you as well. As I say, I hope whatever comes your way next, you enjoy and it works out well for you.
Cheers.
And but we would like to see you back out there in a race car as well.
Yeah, as I said, never say never. Never say never. I would like to build my own, but yeah, I'm not at that place at the minute. So see what happens. It's been a strange 12 months, so yeah, you never know what will happen.
I think you've got that happy place at the moment of spending family time, but also the odd bit of other time that you can get outside of work. You seem to be enjoying helping others out and doing bits and pieces with others. And if that's where the enjoyment comes from, then so be it. There's nothing wrong with that at all. So yeah, again, just thank you very much. 2+ hours has whizzed by. You probably don't realise.
No, I didn't until you said, to be honest.
yeah. But anyway, a massive thank you for doing this. As you say, you're out of your comfort zone on this.
Yeah.
And I hope you have enjoyed it.
Yeah, I have. Thanks.
It might not be your kind of thing, but is there anything you want to say out there before we wrap it up?
Not really. Yeah, nothing. Just keep up the good work. You're doing a great job, mate. So yeah, it's been cracking to speak to you, and looking forward to the ones you do in the future as well.
Well, thank you very much. Hopefully we'll get more out there. Maybe Sally will come on next time. We'll talk to her about it. We
can try. Yeah.
Well, you know. But no, as I say, everything you've done, look back on it fondly. Even if you still look back on some of it and it's not quite right, just remember what you did, and yeah, it's part of history now. So don't forget it, and obviously keep remembering it while it's there.
Yeah.
So yeah, not much more to say unless there are any extra final words. But it's been fantastic talking to you. We've learned a hell of a lot, and I really do look forward to seeing you, even if it's just for a little casual drink at some point soon.
You're right. Yeah, have a beer.
Anyway, this has been the latest Grass Chat. It's been an amazing experience talking to the one and only Mr. John Shorter. My name is Russ. Thank you for watching this whenever it comes out. I hope you enjoy it. I certainly have. John, take care. Keep up the good work with whatever and everything you're doing. And yeah, we'll see you around soon. But everybody else who watches, thank you as well. And take care and see you again.